Hi, this is Emily Rohm, and for this week's Sci-Fi Friday presentation, I will be discussing dragons and the evolutional, morphological, and physiological plausibility of their existence. So to begin, what makes a dragon? Well, a dragon possesses reptilian features along with membranous wings and the ability to breathe fire. And so I will be discussing those points today in this presentation, beginning with the phylogeny of the dragon, which is essentially where it would have appeared in the evolutionary timeline. Next, I'll be discussing how a dragon would be able to fly and how it would be able to breathe fire. So, beginning with the evolution of a dragon. There are two different species of dragons, the hexapodal dragon and the tetrapodal dragon. Now, the hexapodal dragon possesses 6 limbs, including 4 legs and 2 wings. The tetrapodal dragon has 4 limbs. Now, there are 2 subtypes of a tetrapod dragon, and the first one is a wyvern, which has 2 legs, 2 wings, and the serpentine dragon, which only has 4 legs, no wings. And so for this presentation today, I will be focusing on the wyvern because out of all 3 dragons, its ability to fly is the most plausible and the easiest to defend. So we will be focusing on that one. So where would this wyvern appear in the evolutionary timeline? Well, I believe it would have appeared long before the Tyrannosaurus Rex and the prehistoric bird, and would have diverged from a common ancestor of the pterosaur, this dinosaur pictured right here. Now we'll be moving on to flight. So a dragon's wing, as you can see here, is morphologically homologous to a bat's wing, pictured right here, with 4 to 5 digits with membranous tissue stretched in between. And so how could this type of wing evolve from a pterosaur wing right here? Well, that would be possible with the mutation of several different genes. And the first one being the HOX-D gene. Now, the HOX-D gene is part of the homeobox family, which is responsible for the development of many body structures. Now, HOX-D genes 10 and 11 are responsible in bats for limb outgrowth. So most likely these genes in a dragon, or the ancestor of a dragon, would have evolved to elongate the limbs. The next gene is the T-box transcription factor gene, which encodes transcription factors involved in regulating development. Now, these genes, 3 and 5, are responsible for the finger elongation. And next we have the fibroblast growth factor genes, which play a role in the connective tissues in wing membranes. And lastly, we have the beta-catenine and BMP signaling genes. Now, the beta-catenine genes suppress condensation of bone tissue in development, and these genes happen to be suppressed in bats, which allows them to develop that tissue around their fingers. And the BMP signaling genes regulate bone formation and interdigit tissue regression, which essentially would allow for the room for the membranous tissue to grow. So these genes, or at least orthologs of these genes, which are in different species that evolved from a common ancestor, they would all retain the same function of allowing the bat wing to develop, but in a dragon instead. In addition to these genes, a dragon would also have hollow, lightweight, and flexible bones, just like pterosaurs and birds. And these bones would be pneumatized or filled with air sacs. And air sacs are a part of the respiratory system found in pterosaurs and birds. And these would include a partitioned pulmonary system, which gas exchange takes place in the lungs, and the air sac region will just hold the gas in place. So if I can draw your attention over to this picture of the avian respiratory system, this is how it essentially works. Now, when the bird first inhales, air goes into the posterior air sacs, which are located right around here. And when the bird exhales, the air will move from the sacs into the lungs. When the bird breathes in again, the air will move from the lungs into the cranial air sacs. And then when the bird breathes out for the last time, the air will move out of the sacs and out of the trachea. So essentially, it is a circular, unidirectional gas exchange that provides a constant airflow of air, and it is necessary in birds for metabolism and flying. And so, like pterosaurs, the dragon would have pneumatized forelimbs, as you can see right here, meaning that there's the air sacs in the forelimbs. And this allows them to avoid body mass limitations and allows them to have wingspans up to 5 meters or larger. So this means that our dragon or our wyvern can get very big. So it would need something else to help it fly. Wings and pneumatized bones aren't going to cut it. It's going to need, like a hot air balloon, a lifting gas. And there is a lifting gas that is found naturally in organisms, and that is methane. And it is produced in the intestines as a byproduct of digestion. And it is performed by microbes called methanogens, which are actually in the family of archaea. They are not bacteria. And they produce methane using carbon dioxide and hydrogen gas in the process called methanogenesis. Now, methanogenesis is a metabolic process in which carbon dioxide is reduced to methane using hydrogen gas that is produced by anaerobic bacterial fermentation. Now, the carbon dioxide can be provided through cellular respiration, more specifically the citric acid cycle, seen right here. See, it produces carbon dioxide. And this can be produced through the breakdown of proteins, fats, and carbohydrates from food. Now I have the process listed right here and shown on the picture in the left. And once this methane is produced, it can be excreted from the dragon one or two ways, through exhalation or through the other end of the organism, if you know what I mean. So right here I have a little clip of cows producing methane. And you can just see how fast they produce it and how much. So where can this gas be stored? It certainly can't all be stored in the digestive system, and it can't be stored in the dragon's normal lungs or air sacs that are used for oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange. This is going to require the development of another set of air sacs or an extra lung. And to do this, blood vessels need to transport carbon dioxide to the sacs for methanogenesis. And there would also need to be a development of an extra trachea for the exhalation of methane, which is going to play a big role later on down the road. And the development of these organs is going to be done by branching morphogenesis, which is driven by multiple genes and signaling molecules such as transcriptional factors and growth factors. And these factors determine where and when the branching occurs. Now, these are performed by genes that are conserved across species, and these include fibroblast and transformation growth factors and bone morphogenetic proteins, which we discussed earlier during the formation of the dragon wing. And in birds, the formation of airways and air sacs are performed by region-specific mesenchymal properties and the HOX-B genes. And these form the development of the respiratory tract and will play a role in the formation of an extra trachea. So now, what everyone's been waiting for, I'm sure, how would a dragon breathe fire? So what is needed for a fire? Well, first you need oxygen, and then you need fuel and heat. So we already have oxygen. Oxygen is everywhere. As for fuel, do you remember the methane we discussed earlier? That's our fuel. So all we need is a heat source. And that can be found in piezoelectricity. Now, piezoelectricity is a property of a substance to generate electricity when mechanical stress is applied. And these substances can be found in crystals like quartz and in biological materials like collagen and tendons. So we're going to focus on the collagen here. So bone mineral located in the bone matrix are piezoelectric. And when these collagens slide together, electric currents are generated. So in our theoretical dragon, bone acquired from its prey is broken down into smaller pieces and stored in a crop-like pouch that is separate from the digestive tract. You can see in a bird right here, they have a crop where they usually store food because they have to consume it quickly. But in this case, in our dragon, the crop is going to be separate from the digestive tract. And so the dragon will also have squeezing muscles that will apply pressure to these bone fragments, crushing them, and thus generating enough of electric current to produce a spark. And this will happen as the methane gas is pushed out of the sac or wherever it's going to be kept. And once the gas comes in contact with a spark, it ignites. So you can picture this working like a lighter over here. So the gas is pushed up as the thumb presses down the button and applies pressure to the piezoelectric element. So you can think of this nozzle here as a dragon's trachea, and as the gas pushes out of the second trachea, it becomes in contact with a spark generated by the piezoelectric element, and as soon as the spark comes in contact with oxygen, then you get your fire. But the dragon is also going to have to secrete a special saliva to protect its mouth and throat from the heat, and it's also going to need to develop a palatal valve, like crocodiles do, to close the back of the throat to prevent excess gas from coming out. But here you are presented with a sort of trade-off, a fire versus flight concept. So you're going to have a reserve of methane in this dragon's respiratory system. And so a steady consumption of nutrients to produce enough gas for flight and fire is needed. And once you use the methane for flight or for fire, it depletes the reserves over time. So eventually the dragon is going to need to choose whether or not it uses the methane for flight or fight in a situation. So let's say, for example, if it's getting attacked by some knights, is it going to fly away or is it going to produce fire to fight them off? So it's going to be very careful about how much methane it produces and how it uses it. So yeah, that essentially was my presentation. Here's all the sources I used. Found a lot of stuff actually, it's very interesting. And I would like to thank everyone for coming on this ride, and thank you very much.